Hey guys, so I'm finishing up the series I started a couple weeks back called Conversation with the Devil. And I know that some of you may have missed it. Maybe some of you are a little iffy about the devil. Maybe you have no idea what attention you're supposed to pay to him. Maybe you don't think he's any big deal at all. Maybe you think he gets blamed for a lot of things that he doesn't even need to be blamed for. Maybe you don't even know if there is a devil. And wherever you stand on the devil, I think you're going to find this interesting. This is the last piece of the puzzle, and I'm looking at a conversation that Jesus actually had with the devil. And a lot of people don't even realize the devil is actually quoted in a conversation with somebody, and it's in Matthew 4. We're in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, and right around verse 8 is where we're picking up today. And if you missed the first couple of pieces of this puzzle, then by all means go back and look and see what you missed, because you're going to want to pick up where we started. So listen, what is the devil like? What is he really about? If he is there, even if you're iffy about him, what would he be like? What is the Christian version of the devil like? So much of culture says that the devil is this scary, angry, yelling guy with a trident, and he loves intimidating people and scaring them and chasing them and hurting them physically, and that's culture's idea. But what really is Jesus's concept of the devil? What was he like according to Jesus? That's why we're looking at this piece in Matthew. And I'm going to back us up, and I'm going to take us through this last ditch effort that the devil makes tempting Jesus. And the reason is because in this we get to see what are the devil's three best plays. What is this last and final play? What's his angle? Because if he used it on Jesus, he's not going to hold back on using it on you and me. And there's a lot that we can learn from how the devil operates. And we're going to see what the devil really is like. Last week, Pastor Mike put it so well. He said the devil gets made out to be this really scary, red-faced guy. But the truth is the devil, as you'll see in this little passage, comes across as very reasonable. He's really reasonable sounding, and that's what makes him so good at what he does. He's just this most reasonable, logical sounding person. He starts with something that's very true, that you can't argue with, and then he just uses this great logic to help you, quote unquote, help you get to a conclusion that you want to get to. And it's so tricky. But listen to this. This is Jesus's last stand against the devil, and the devil's last play on Jesus. It says in Matthew 4, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and said, quote, all this I will give you. He said, if you will bow down and worship me. That's Matthew 4, verses 8 and 9. All this I'll give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Takes him up to somewhere very, very high. I don't know what mountain this was, but he shows him from a very high place all of the kingdoms of the world, all of the impressiveness of the various cities of the time. And I'm sure that you can imagine, being taken up somewhere very, very high that looks over a very, very impressive city, New York City with Manhattan and the downtown skyline, or maybe Chicago with all of the, impressive skyscrapers right in the central part of downtown, or something like it. And all these impressive things, beautiful buildings, teeming with people all over the place, marketplaces, just a beautiful sight if you can imagine it. And this is the devil's ploy. He says, I'll give you access to everything that you see here. I'll put you in authority over everything that you see here. I'll give it to you. When? Now. I'll give it to you now. Right now, I'll give you this. I have this destiny I can offer. Here it is. What's it going to cost? Practically nothing. Practically nothing. And you can get to it now. Doesn't that sound like an amazing deal? I'll give you this amazing destiny. I can give it to you right now. What a deal. What an amazing salesman. And here's the thing, Jesus reacts in a big way. He basically yells at him. You know, anytime you see Jesus with an exclamation mark after something he says, he's basically yelling, he's shouting. If you can imagine Jesus yelling or shouting. He says, "Get away from me, Satan, for it's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Well, here's the thing. For most of us, that just seems obvious, right? You could almost skip this whole exchange. After all, I mean, how many times has the devil shown up in front of you and me in person and says, "I will give you the kingdoms of the world if you just bow down and worship me right here and right now"? Well, the good news is he doesn't do that. The bad news is he does it in other ways. And if you can imagine for a moment what that might look like in your case. No, he won't be that obvious. He won't be that obvious. He's too sharp. He's not like that. He isn't going to run the exact same play the exact same way, but he will run the exact same play in a different way for the same purpose. And so this is, I wish it was that. I wish it was so simple, but the truth is he's better than that. And this is how reasonable he is. I'll tell you what I think he'll do. Just like with Jesus, he'll wait patiently for a good opportunity. Jesus has been without food for 40 days. He's actually taken himself as close as humanly possible to starving to death to give the devil this opportunity to throw everything at him that he has, because he knows in the future there's going to be a time that's coming where he will have to stay faithful, even though it would be so easy, so understandable to just give up and walk away, not go through with this thing, the suffering, this crucifixion. I mean, it's just terrible. It's shameful, and it would be so easy. He's doing this on purpose, and the devil will wait so patiently for the right opportunity with you as well. When you're tired, when you're physically tired of a situation, when you're emotionally exhausted. Sometimes you can be both. Sometimes you're physically tired and emotionally exhausted, but he'll wait for the right time when you're just ripe to come at you. And he'll be a voice that sounds so reasonable. And it will say something along the lines of what he said to Jesus. He'll say, "Look, you're killing yourself here. You're killing yourself here. You're suffering. This is terrible. I hate to see this." You know, can't you imagine that line of reasoning? This is really bad. You're really hurting here. Look what you could have. And maybe there's a way of bringing to mind or showing you what you could have. Now, Jesus' destiny was to be a king. And so what did he show Jesus? He showed Jesus kingdoms of the world that Jesus could be a king over. He said, I'll give this to you right now. Very low cost. And there are probably things in your future, ideas you have about your destiny that would be very appealing because of who you are and who God actually made you to be, just like with Jesus. You know, maybe you have a future hope of a family, or maybe you have a future hope of a certain kind of work that you'll do that's very meaningful. Maybe you have a future hope of a certain type of lifestyle or position, or who knows what. Maybe your hope is just to have a day where you won't be stressed out all the time, where your physical body won't be hanging you up any longer. Maybe you have some idea of something like that. And I believe that if the devil runs this same play on you, it will be showing you where you could just skip and fast forward right to the end, where you don't have to put up with all of the stuff between then and now that you're putting up with. And his voice will say to you, look, we can go there right now. We can get there now. We can skip to that part right now, and it won't cost you anything like what it would cost you the way that you're doing it. We can get there now. And we can avoid the waiting. We can avoid the holding off. We can avoid the staying faithful for years at a time. We can avoid having to hold your tongue and filter your words over and over again. You can just let whatever you feel, just let it right out at whoever you're around. You can say what you feel in the moment. You don't have to stop and think. You don't have to forgive people. You don't have to humble yourself and actually admit to the 2% of the problem that you own, even though it was 98% the other guy's fault. We can just go around all of that. He's so much like a bad salesman. He makes it impossible, almost impossible, to argue with his reasoning. I don't know if you've ever had an experience with someone who's a bad salesman, just a really bad one, really pushy. They start out with things that you believe to be true, and they get you to agree that those things are true, and after that they just have this way of using a warped version of logic to get you to the conclusion that they want you to get to, which is you really should buy the car that you don't want. You really should lock yourself into this contract that you don't really believe that you want, but I'm telling you, you do. And he's just so good at it. With the devil, it's not a car he's trying to sell you. It's an outcome for your life. So much bigger. So much more at stake. And it's always something that you want. That's the key with the devil. It's always something that you want, that you think that you want. The devil doesn't tempt people with things that aren't interesting to them. I mean, it just doesn't work like that, right? I mean, how's that ever going to work? It never works, right? I can't tempt you with broccoli if you don't care about vegetables. And so it's always something that you want. It's always something that would be exciting for you. It's always something that you would love to have right now. It's always something where you get to skip stuff that you don't want to go through. That's always part of the deal. We can fast forward and skip the stuff that you don't want to have to deal with in life. We can skip right ahead, and you can have it now. Now is always part of the equation. Faster is always part of the equation. And Jesus would tell you, if you're opening to learning from Jesus in this moment, it's always got something you want, but it never has what you most want, is part of the deal. It's always based on something you want, but it's never bringing you, mysteriously, the thing that you most wanted. Peace. Peace in your relationships with the people that are most important in your life, and peace with the one who made you. It never includes those things. And when you begin in the decision, your assumption is, if I could just get what I want, peace will follow. But the thing is, when you do it His way, when you cut corners, and when you're willing to just go the opposite direction of God in this one place, to just cut the corner, to speed this whole process up and get you what you want now, you actually forfeit all across the board, every time, forfeit the thing that you most want, that's going to leave you thirsty and leave you hanging, leave you stressed. And that's peace in the relationship with the one who made you. You can't have peace in your relationship with the one who made you when you're taking the opposite path that He gave you. The devil doesn't advertise that part of the deal, but it's there. What I'd ask you to do today is to think about one or two of your bad decisions. Now, you could say, I just can't think of any. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, I've made some good decisions, and I'm happy with the good decisions I've made, but I wouldn't have any trouble coming up with some of the bad ones. I'm sure that you wouldn't either, not if you really gave it some effort. You've got some bad decisions, that one wasn't so good. And I don't know what your bad decisions have been, but I can tell you right across the board, no matter who you are, no matter where you're listening from, if you've got bad decisions, they've all got a couple of things in common. The first is they all began with something that you wanted. They always started with something that you wanted, And they always gave you the opportunity to get it faster than you were going to get doing it the slow way or the right way or God's way, whatever way that you put it. And I don't know what they were, like I said, but somewhere in the deal, you must have realized that what you want wasn't really what you most wanted. Otherwise, you wouldn't think of it as a bad decision, right? You wouldn't think of it that way. You'd think, oh, that was a good decision. But if you think of it as a bad decision, you realize now, later on, at great cost, that the thing that you wanted didn't automatically bring along peace. It didn't bring you peace. It left you hanging on peace. You got what you wanted, but somehow you got what you wanted and it didn't have peace with it. And that's a bad deal, no matter which way you put it, because if it brings you something you want but leaves out the thing that you most want, what good is it? What good is it? A deal with no peace for you afterward. No peace about your relationship with God. No peace in your relationships with the people that you're responsible for, committed to, your friends, your spouse, your parents, your kids, your whoever's. What good is that deal? Not a lot. Not a lot. What I'm here to tell you today is that there is a destiny from God for every single person. And the truth is, I don't know if God gives you everything that you think that you want currently in that destiny. I really have no idea. I think sometimes He will, sometimes He may not. Sometimes you may realize the thing that you wanted, you don't even really want as much as you thought that you wanted it. But there is a destiny for your life that God has in mind when He created you, a destiny that makes sense for who you were built to be. And it's meant to be fulfilling, it's meant to give you joy, but at the end of it, there is peace. There is real peace to be had, felt, enjoyed. And no matter what the devil will deal with you or offer, or whatever you call it, bargain, barter, no matter what he presents you, if it isn't peace, if it doesn't have peace in it, and if you have to forfeit your peace in order to obtain it, you need to just leave it on the table and walk away. You need to. You know, the one thing I think we have to keep in mind in order to avoid falling victim to the devil's pitches is to remember the thing that Jesus must have held on to in those very, very difficult moments. You know, dying of hunger, basically anything would have been better than what he was going through. Food, water, some shade. I mean, I don't know exactly where he was in the desert, but I'm thinking he was suffering pretty bad. And in that moment where the devil takes him up on top of this mountain to show him the kingdoms of the world, Jesus, meant to be a king, looks out at those kingdoms. And in that moment, he's being shown something that he might want. But he says no. He says no. He says, no, get away from me. I'm not going to serve somebody else. I'm going to serve the Lord. I have a destiny with the Lord. And I'm thinking, you take this for what it's worth, but I'm thinking when he looked out and saw those kingdoms, he thought to himself, yes, those are kingdoms, but they're not my kingdom. Sure, those are kingdoms, but they're not the kingdom that I was sent here to build. Yeah, they're kingdoms, and it would cost so much less than what it's going to cost me to build this kingdom that I've come to build. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. So many of us know just because something costs less and appears to be the same does not mean that it is the same. It does not mean that it is the same. And the devil capitalizes on our readiness to jump for now and for less expensive, just like he did with Jesus in that moment. But what I want to tell you today, if you forget everything else that I've said, is that you have a destiny. You have a destiny with God that brings peace. And there is no amount of cutting corners, no amount of speeding up the process, no amount of skipping over the hard stuff that will ever replace what you forfeit when you give in to doing it His way and leave behind the path that God would have taken. There's no amount of it that's worth it. There's no amount of speed. There's no amount of pleasure in the here and now that will replace what's lost when you give up peace to get what it is you think you want. What I'd give you to do today, something you can hold on to and use the next time you have an important life decision to make, is this question. This place, you stop. Please stop when you have a life decision and give God a little pause so that He can actually answer this question. Here's the question. If I do this, does it take me closer to peace with my Father or farther away? Does it take me closer to peace, or does it forfeit peace? Yeah, I may want it now, and I in a sense I think I'll have relief once I get what I want, but will it really give me peace with my Father that lasts? Or is it putting a hurdle between me and Him? Am I creating a place where I have to feel ashamed every time I think of what I had to do in order to get what I want? That's a rough one. That's a rough one, but it might be the most important question that you ask. Will you give God a place to speak with you? Will you pause? Will you pray and ask, God, will this take me closer to you or farther away? Will this build my relationships or will it detract from them? That's a question I want to leave you with this week. And I want you to make a commitment right now to just say, you know what, God, the next time I have a decision to make, I'm going to pause and I'm going to give you a chance to speak. I'm going to invite you by your Spirit in me, by your Spirit through other people, other believers around me, to just speak into my life some wisdom and something I can grasp a hold of and get a direction from. Is this going to bring peace or take it from me? I refuse to accept anything less than my destiny, God-given. That's a fact. I'm asking you to pray with me today and to make a commitment to give Him that space and to answer that question for you. Father, right now I'm asking on behalf of everybody that's tuned in today, will you help us? We know what we should do most of the time. We know what we want. That's an easy one. But God, will you come into this space? Will you help us remember to create a space and give us some little red flag when the time comes, when there's a decision to be made and it's going to take us farther or closer? God, will you just help us take that time and give us a place where you can speak with us? Maybe you can disrupt the situation just enough where you can come in and speak with us and give us some direction, left or right, and remind us what it is that your path is, and put up little red flags all over the place, around the places where we might cut corners thinking that we'll get to the thing we want and get peace that way. God, I pray, Lord, you would speak to us in that moment. Be willing to speak to us. We believe that you are, and we just ask you, help us to remember and help us to hear. Help us to hear what your voice sounds like. Help us to understand what's true, and help us in every way possible to resist the temptation to forfeit our peace with you and head farther away instead of closer. In Jesus' name I ask these things. Amen. I so appreciate you tuning in with us throughout this little series that we've done, and I'm just asking you, I'm really pleading with you, think about these things. Even if you don't just take to them right away. Go back, read the Gospels for yourself. Be your own investigator. Be your own decider. Don't just take my word for it. See what the Scriptures will speak to you and see what Jesus is really like for yourself. Thanks for listening, everybody.